Okay everybody, in this video I will be demonstrating how to make a pulled handle and then also how to attach your pulled handle to your coil built mug. So things you're going to need are your bowl of water, preferably a low and wide bowl because you don't want it to tip over, and you will need a knife of some kind. You can use just like a butter knife because you're gonna have to cut the handle after you pull it. You'll need your wire tool to cut a chunk of clay off to start, and I'm going to use my scoring tool, but you can use your serrated rib, and then you'll also need a paintbrush for slipping and scoring. So, and then of course you'll need your mug that you've coil built that's ready to go so that you can attach your handle to it when you're done. So, I have my wedged ball of clay here. Your clay should be wedged when you do this so that there are no air bubbles because that will cause you issues, but we've probably done that in class so you don't have to worry about it. So I'm just going to use my wire tool and cut a chunk of clay off my wedged ball, and then I'm going to make it into a ball that's about this size. It's probably like a ½ pound of clay, and that's a manageable size for a pulled handle. So then what I'm going to do is just begin shaping it into a cone-like shape. So I can start to pull it because it's easier to kind of get it into that shape to begin. So now that it's like this, you see there's a more narrow end and a wider end. So now that I'm here, you're going to take your thumb and your finger and you're going to squeeze it at the top of the clay so you have something to hold on to when you're pulling it. So I would do that on both sides, and then your clay is going to look like this. So now you have like a handle almost to hold on to. So when you're pulling a handle, you have to think about the shape of your fingers. So your thumb and your pointer fingers should be in a teardrop shape so that when you're pulling, it makes a nice wide flat handle. So first things first, you're going to dip your hand in the water. You're going to choose the hand that's more comfortable. So I would say if your more dominant hand is your right hand, hold the clay in your left hand and vice versa. So what you're going to do is just wet your hand and then get the whole piece of clay wet, except for where you're holding it, because that will make it more difficult to hold on to. So now that it's all uniformly wet, you're going to just hold your hand in the teardrop shape and start on one side and just start slowly pulling down. You're not adding a lot of pressure. You're actually barely adding any pressure. You are just kind of sliding down to start the shape of the handle. Throughout this process, you're not going to be adding very much pressure. It's more of just the downward motion that stretches the clay. So what I'm doing is thinking about this teardrop shape. I just continue to pull in that shape, and then once I do it 3 times, I will grab the clay with my dominant hand and turn it around so that I can do the same thing on the opposite side. And you'll start to see that the clay is turning into that teardrop looking shape that your hand is making. So you'll have to do this several times and keep flipping it around so it creates a uniform shape. And you're going to continue to do this until the clay stretches to about 7 inches long, because that's pretty long and long enough so that you can turn it into a rounded handle shape. So you can see when I start to bend it, it bends in a natural curve rather than like a bumpy curve, because the water helps the clay get uniformly wet and bend naturally. So I'm just going to keep repeating the step, turning the clay around every so often I would do 3 to 5 pulls each way and then flip it. And you'll see that as you go, the clay gets more and more stretched out. But just remember to keep your hand in that shape so that the handle becomes more flat rather than rounded. A more flat handle is just more comfortable to hold than a more round handle because it has more surface area to hold on to. So as you can see, the clay is stretching longer and longer. And then every so often, I will use my pointer finger and my middle finger and slide down both sides of the clay and flip it around and do the same thing. That makes it so that the surface of the handle is flat. And I will do this with my pointer and middle finger towards the end. So now that I have this long flat handle, you have to have a piece of wood to lay it on. So I'm just going to lay this down and let it dry. You see here, I have this handle that's a little bit more dried out, and you can, once it's a little bit more dry, you can set it in a more curved position like this so that that curve will be already there for you to work with when you go to cut it and attach it to the mug. So before this, I pulled a handle to make sure it was hard enough so that I could attach it to the mug without any problems. You're going to have to let your handle sit for a while, probably a half hour to an hour to dry out enough. Here I have this handle, it's leather hard, and now I can work with it to attach it. So you make sure you don't let the handle get too hard. You're going to have to keep an eye on it. You can't just like leave it alone for a while. So what I'm going to do is use my knife, whatever knife you have. You can use your butter knife if you want. And I'm just going to cut off the more narrow end of the handle that we've made. And then I have this straight edge. I'm just going to pinch that edge. It might need a little bit of water depending on how long you've let it sit. If it's too hard, yeah, just add a little water. And so I'm pinching the clay so that the end is smooth. Then I have the other end, and so I'm gonna cut off just below where I was holding it, so roughly right there, and I'm just gonna set this clay off to the side. It's gonna be a little bit harder, so you should make sure to wedge it up and put it back with your bunch of clay. So now that I have the handle that looks like this, I'm going to just push down the sharp edges that I just created and then hold the handle as if I were to pull it in my thumb and pointer finger, and I'm just going to pat it like this. That strengthens the clay where you're going to attach it to the mug. So because you're going to be attaching, so now it looks just like this. So now that you're going to be attaching your handle to the mug, which is a rounded shape, you should try to work this piece, the thicker end, into a more rounded shape so that when you put it on there, it will easily attach. So you see now it has a bit of an arch to it. So now that I have my mug and my handle that I've created, I'm just going to move my bowl of water out of the way. Dry up the mess that I made. And I'm going to hold my handle in one hand and hold my mug in the other. So you see this is a little bit long. It's going to be a little bit too big. So maybe I want to shorten it a little bit. So what I'm going to do is just cut a little bit off Not too much because you can always cut more. So that's pretty good. So now what I'm going to do is start shaping the end so that I can attach it nicely to the body of the mug. And this looks like it's pretty good. So you see now that the handle is really uniformly touching the mug. So now that it's in this shape, I'm going to score it. So you can use your serrated rib. It'll probably be pretty easy to do since it's already in the rounded shape. I scored that really well because this needs to be a really good connection between the mug and the handle. And then I'm going to see on the mug, okay, maybe you want it about a 1/2 inch from the top of the mug. So now I'm going to pick up the mug and just score onto the mug. About as big as the handle. And then what I'm going to do is take some of the water from the bowl and a little bit of slip and just really wet that whole area that you just scored. And same with the handle. Make sure that this connection is really good. So now that I have this, I'm going to stick the handle onto the slipped and scored area on the mug. So now it looks like this. And what I'm going to do is, oops, make sure you don't squash your mug. I just made it an oval. So make sure when you're doing this, your mug is leather hard, but I'm just going to start smoothing that joint together. So you're gonna have to figure out how to hold it best to smooth that joint. And so I'm working my way all the way around the handle and smoothing that in. So you can see there, now those lines are joined together and you can't really see that line where it was attached. And then on the top, it might be a bit of an angle, so you're gonna have to maybe use a different tool. You guys can use your little wooden tool that you have and like you did between the coils, just kind of join those two together really well. And then once you've made that attachment, it's gonna look a little bit messy. You can get a little water on your finger and go over it to get rid of the bumps. And then what I do is I use my paintbrush, not with a lot of water. Make sure it's pretty dry. You don't wanna add too much water because it will make the handles really flimsy. So now you can see that both sides of the handle are uniformly attached and there's no line from the attachment point. You can't really see where it has been attached. So now that the top is attached, I'm just going to shape it a little bit, make sure there aren't any bumps on it. And then I'm going to begin to bend the handle. If it's a little dry, just use your finger, add a little bit of water to make sure that it will bend how you want it to. So I'm gonna add a little water on this side as well. And now I'm bending it to fit onto there. So now that I kind of have chosen the shape of the handle, it's gonna be up to you. It's more comfortable for the hand when it has like a swooping up motion like this and goes back down. That's kind of what this is doing, because that allows your fingers to sit comfortably inside the handle. So now that I've done that and shaped kind of how the handle is going to be on the mug, I'm going to lift it up and then do the same thing. Score where both sides are. So I'm gonna set this down. I'm gonna gently open up the handle. Try not to move it too much because it's starting to take the shape that you want it to. And then I'm gonna score on the mug as well. So score on the handle and score on the mug. Then you're gonna take your paintbrush with a little slip. I'm stealing some off of this handle that I just made. And you're just going to paint on the slip on both sides and really stick it together well. Another thing you can do is lift it up and put your hand on the inside to support the inside of the mug. I would recommend doing that. And then you're just going to smear that in. So it's gonna look like this. Once you're done, you're not gonna be able to see that joint of where you put the two parts together. And then on the inside, maybe I'll just use my needle tool. I think you all have one of those, and just make sure that use just the side of it, not the point. Make sure that the edge is joined together. So it looks like that. And then I'll just quickly go over it with my paintbrush and smooth it out. And that is how you join a handle to a mug.